In the heart of the galaxy, inside a colossal chamber carved from shimmering crystal and wrapped in glowing energy fields, the Grand Galactic Council gathered, hundreds of alien leaders seated in towering rows, scaled bodies, feathered faces, metallic eyes, all turned toward a single floating projection at the center of the room, Earth. A small blue world, quiet, distant, fragile-looking compared to the massive empires that ruled the stars. For years, the Council had debated what to do about humanity, a species known for rapid growth, unpredictable innovation, and a history of violent wars. Some feared humans. Some hated them. Most dismissed them as emotional and reckless. But today, every leader was united by one goal: control Earth before Earth became a threat. The Council speaker, a tall creature with silver skin and cold red eyes, raised a hand and the chamber fell silent. A silence so heavy it felt like the room itself was holding its breath. His voice echoed through the hall, calm but sharp. We vote today on the human expansion ban. No more fleets. No more colonies. No more warships. A ripple of approval passed through the chamber. Smug smiles, confident nods, soft laughter. Another counselor stood, brushing dust from her scales, voice dripping with arrogance. Humans are emotional. Humans are desperate. Humans are weak. They must be contained. The room erupted in agreement. Humans were lucky to survive their last war. Another counselor sneered. They won't dare challenge us again. For hours they debated, but the conclusion was already decided. When the final vote was cast, a booming chime echoed across the chamber. The screen flashed a single line. Decision passed. Humans banned from space expansion. The council speaker raised his hand again, voice filled with icy confidence. We will send a final warning to Earth. They are forbidden from building warships. If they resist, they will face consequences. The chamber laughed. Not nervous laughter, but mocking laughter, the kind that comes from power and pride. Several leaders smirked. Humans won't resist. They know their place. They're isolated now, alone. They learned their lesson. The speaker signaled his aides. Transmit the warning. Across light years, a pulse of energy shot toward Earth, carrying the message. Do not build warships again. This is your final warning. And with that, the council relaxed, confident, smug, satisfied. Drinks were poured. Celebrations began. News networks broadcast the victory across the galaxy. Council protects peace. The headlines glowed. Humans controlled. Threat neutralized. Crowds on alien worlds cheered. Commentators laughed. Soldiers toasted. Everyone believed the same thing: humans would obey. They always did. They had no allies, no power, no fleets. Humanity was nothing. But far below the celebration, deep in the council's command sector, a single officer sat alone at a scanning console, half bored, half tired, monitoring distant signals out of routine. Suddenly, his screen flashed red. A sharp alarm sliced through the silence. His eyes widened. Object detected. Leaving Earth's orbit. He frowned. That couldn't be right. Earth wasn't allowed to launch anything large. Maybe it was debris. Maybe a satellite failure. He zoomed in. The object accelerated, fast. Too fast. Far faster than any known ship. His chest tightened. Speed reading is impossible. He tried to hail the council chamber, but they were still laughing, still celebrating, still blind. He zoomed further. The object wasn't drifting. It was moving with purpose, cutting through space like a blade through water. He whispered to himself, "What are you?" He activated long-range scanning. The system froze, glitched, rebooted. Then a single message flashed across the screen in bright, brutal letters. Warning ignored. His breath stopped. His heart hammered. His claws shook over the controls. No, that's not possible. He tried to access ship data, but the system shut down again, rebooting into emergency mode. A second message appeared. Trajectory locked. Locked on what? He rerouted the scan. The object wasn't drifting randomly. It wasn't fleeing. It wasn't hiding. It was heading straight toward the council. Straight toward them. straight toward the very leaders who believed humans were weak. He stumbled out of his chair, running toward the council chamber, voice shaking. Urgent! Urgent alert! Unknown object inbound from Earth. The doors slid open to a room filled with laughter and arrogance. He gasped for breath. Something left Earth, moving at impossible speed. It sent a message. The speaker turned, annoyed. A message? The officer swallowed hard, voice cracking. It said, "Warning ignored." The room fell silent. The laughter stopped. Smiles faded. Confusion turned to unease. A counselor scoffed nervously. "Probably a glitch." Another muttered, "Earth doesn't have the technology." The officer shook his head, tears forming. "It shut down my scans. It's moving faster than any ship. It's coming here." A cold chill shivered through the chamber. The speaker stepped back, voice weaker now. "How fast?" The officer whispered brokenly. "Fast enough to reach us in days." The counselors exchanged terrified glances. "That's impossible. Humans can't." But the officer cut them off. "It's real." He pointed to the screen behind them as it flickered to life. A small object, dark, sharp, silent, hurtled through space, leaving a blazing trail. The screen zoomed closer, closer, closer. There was no crew reading, no energy signature, no identification, just a cold black hull. And then the data beneath it updated. Class: unknown. Origin: human. Status: unstoppable. The speaker's voice cracked. "Impossible. Humans can't build something like that." The officer whispered, "Maybe they already did." Panic rippled through the chamber. "We need fleets. We must intercept it. Why didn't Earth respond to our warning?" But deep down, they knew the answer. Humans didn't respond because they didn't negotiate. They didn't bargain. They didn't beg. They warned. And when warnings were ignored, there was always a price. The room's lights flickered. A final message appeared, this time across every screen in the chamber, every screen on the station, every screen in the system. "Enforcement begins." The counselors froze in horror. The speaker staggered backward, voice trembling. "What have we triggered?" The officer stared at the screen, tears falling. As he whispered the truth the galaxy never wanted to admit. Humans don't pardon. And far across the stars, the object kept coming. Silent, fast, unstoppable. And it wasn't slowing down. It was only beginning. The words "enforcement begins" still flickered on every screen when the council chamber erupted. Not into action, not into strategy, but into loud, panicked denial because accepting the truth meant accepting a nightmare, and none of them were ready to believe that humans, the species they mocked and controlled, could send something powerful enough to shake the galaxy. And the speaker slammed his fist on the podium, forcing his voice to rise above the chaos. "Calm yourselves. This is a bluff. Humans are incapable of such technology." And the counselors clung to those words like drowning creatures grabbing at broken wood, because fear was rising fast, too fast, and pride was the only shield they had left, even if it was made of lies. And one counselor, a narrow-eyed diplomat with golden scales, stood and sneered, "Humans survived by luck, not strength." And another laughed nervously, "They can barely feed their planet. How could they build a weapon?" And slowly mockery began spreading again, weak and shaky, but still growing, like a wounded animal pretending it wasn't dying, because arrogance was easier than fear, and they needed to believe humans were weak, needed to believe humans were desperate, needed to believe humans could be ignored without consequence. And the speaker nodded sharply, feeding their denial. "This object is likely debris, a failed launch, a malfunction," and heads bobbed in agreement, relief washing through the room, not because they were convinced, but because they were terrified of the alternative. And in that trembling relief, laughter returned, cruel, hollow laughter, and voices followed. "Humans can't send ships across systems. They barely survived their last war. They're isolated, stranded, broken." And the council convinced themselves of their own lies, like children hiding under blankets, pretending the monster outside wasn't real. And while they wrapped themselves in comfort, news networks across the galaxy picked up the story, broadcasting headlines dripping with mockery. Human bluff exposed. Earth throws tantrum. Weak species makes empty threat. And across alien cities, crowds chuckled, scoffed, and rolled their eyes because everyone believed the same thing. Humans had no power, no allies, no fleets, and therefore no price to demand. And in military barracks, soldiers laughed too, slamming their drinks on tables. Humans? A threat. I could beat 10 humans myself. And in training academies, instructors smirked, teaching cadets the same ancient lesson. Humans panic easily. They don't follow through, and rumors began spinning. Earth is bluffing to get attention. They want sympathy. They're desperate. And all of it built a fragile wall between the galaxy and the truth. A wall made of arrogance, ignorance, and pride. But walls built on lies always crack. And this one began to crumble when the officer from the scanning deck burst into the council's war room, breathless, shaking, eyes wide with terror, clutching a datapad so tightly his claws dug into the metal. The object, he choked out, has passed the border line. The room fell silent again. Heavier now, colder, deadlier. And a counselor frowned, still clinging to denial. How fast? The officer's voice trembled like breaking glass. Faster than any ship in recorded history. A hush swallowed the room. Pride cracked. Confidence shattered. But instead of panic turning into action, it twisted into anger, bitter and childish. And a counselor slammed a hand on the table, voice rising with frustrated rage. Earth dares violate our laws? Another snarled. This is an insult. The speaker hissed. Send a message to their planet. Remind them they are forbidden to build warships. And so the galaxy sent another warning, short and sharp. Cease actions immediately or face punishment. And when Earth did not respond, the council scoffed louder. They are afraid. They know we can wipe them out. They won't dare continue. The officer swallowed hard, voice breaking. The object has accelerated again. It will reach us even sooner. But the speaker waved him off, refusing to look at the data, refusing to admit the truth. We have border fleets. We have defenses. We have technology that humans could never dream of. And the counselors repeated it like a prayer, a mantra, a desperate spell to hold back fear. Humans are weak. Humans are primitive. Humans don't follow through. And one counselor smirked, cruel and confident. Even if they ignore warnings, there will be no price. And those words echoed through the room like poison. No price. As if the galaxy believed it could disrespect, control, and ignore Earth forever without consequences. But far beyond their arrogance, beyond their laughter, beyond their fragile pride, deep space scanners continued flashing. Alarms grew louder, signals grew clearer, and across every active screen in the war room, a new line appeared, simple, cold, merciless. Enforcement is not a negotiation. The officer stared at it with tears in his eyes, whispering the truth the galaxy refused to see. Humans warned us, and the council, still clinging to mockery, still believed the greatest lie of all, that warnings come without cost. They would soon learn how wrong they were. The moment the message enforcement is not a negotiation appeared, every screen in the council war room dimmed, leaving only that one line glowing like a wound in the darkness. And even though no sound accompanied it, every leader felt the message like a blade pressed against their throat, sharp, cold, unforgiving, but still. They clung to denial because believing in the truth meant admitting they were helpless, and pride was easier than fear. Yet outside their arrogance-filled chamber, in the cold silence of space, the unknown object continued its impossible journey, cutting through star systems with terrifying precision, not slowing, not drifting, not responding, and every time it passed a border sensor, alarms screamed and then died, systems glitching, scanners shutting down, like the object was erasing the galaxy's ability to see it, track it, or stop it, and fleets stationed along the outer sectors watched in horror as it streaked past them like a shadow of death, silent and unstoppable, leaving powerless ships trembling in its wake, because each vessel it passed suffered the same fate. Engines dead, weapons offline, comms frozen, entire armadas rendered useless without a single shot fired, like the object wasn't attacking, but declaring dominance, saying without words, "You cannot touch me." In command stations across dozens of planets, military officers stared at the feeds, sweat dripping down their backs, fear tightening their throats, because nothing in the galaxy moved like that. Nothing ignored physics. Nothing disabled fleets from a distance. And as the object continued forward, communication networks lit up with terrified reports. Unidentified craft bypassed sector line. Border fleets disabled. No response to hails. No visible crew. No heat signatures. And every report ended with the same desperate sentence. It doesn't stop. But instead of mobilizing, instead of planning, instead of preparing for the worst, the council doubled down on pride, the speaker snapping. A weapon without communication is meaningless. It is trying to scare us. And counselors nodded, forcing fake confidence onto their faces. Yes, psychological tactics. Primitive human intimidation. But their voices shook, their hands trembled, and their eyes darted nervously to the screens, because they could lie to each other. But they could not lie to themselves. They felt it, the horrible truth crawling into their hearts. This was not intimidation. This was execution. Meanwhile, the object kept coming. Silent, straight, perfect. No deviation, no hesitation, no emotion. Watching it on the star maps felt like watching a blade slide toward a beating heart. Slow enough to witness, fast enough to doom. And even the hardest military commanders felt panic tightening around them, because every emergency protocol they tried to activate failed. Every defense system remained frozen. Every interception plan collapsed before it could begin, and one terrified officer whispered the thought everyone feared but no one dared speak. "It's not responding because it doesn't. Consider us a threat." And that sentence broke something inside the room, because the galaxy had always believed itself superior. More advanced, more civilized, more powerful. But this object, this silent human creation, treated them like insects beneath its notice. As it crossed into central space, the region closest to the council, entire civilizations fell silent, news anchors stopped speaking mid-broadcast. Civilians stared at screens with wide, terrified eyes, children clung to parents, soldiers locked in place, because for the first time in centuries, the galaxy understood fear. Not fear of war, not fear of invasion, but fear of something unstoppable, something inevitable, something that had already decided their fate. Still, the council tried one final time to assert control, sending a system-wide hail. "Unknown vessel, identify yourself. You are violating council law. Turn back immediately or face consequences." And the message echoed through space, loud, commanding, arrogant. But space answered with silence, heavy and chilling, because there was no negotiation, no reply, no acknowledgement, only the object drifting closer. Like a predator that didn't need to threaten its prey. It simply needed to arrive. Minutes later, the war room screens flickered again, shifting from star maps to a live feed of the object itself, close enough now to see its shape clearly. A long black structure, smooth, seamless, featureless, no windows, no symbols, no engines visible, like a coffin built for an entire galaxy, and the scan labels updated automatically, shaking, glitching, and then locking into place with brutal clarity. Distance TO Council. 72 hours. Gasps echoed through the chamber. 3 days. 3 days until the object reached them. 3 days until humans collected the price. The speaker's voice cracked, breaking for the first time. Impossible. Nothing moves that fast. But the officer at the console whispered the words everyone dreaded. It's accelerating. Outside. Across planets and stations, fear turned into chaos. Riots broke out. Emergency shelters filled. Broadcasts shifted from jokes to screams. The galaxy finally understood. This was not a bluff. This was not a scare. This was not a warning. This was punishment. And the worst part wasn't the speed, or the silence, or the power. The worst part was the realization creeping into every mind. Humans didn't beg. Humans didn't plead. Humans didn't repeat warnings. They warned once. And then they acted as the countdown to 72 hours echoed through every command deck and every trembling mind. The galaxy clung to one last fragile hope, that someone, somewhere, could stop the object before it reached the council. because accepting the truth meant accepting their own destruction, and no empire was ready to face that. So they rushed, panicked, desperate, throwing together interception fleets made of thousands of ships, cruisers, dreadnoughts, carriers, anything that could move, anything that could fire, gathering at the edge of central space like a wall built out of fear, and every soldier aboard those ships sat stiff, hands shaking over their controls, hearts pounding in their chests, staring into the dead black void ahead, waiting for the thing they couldn't understand. And in the council chamber the speaker watched the fleet formation on the screens, forcing a cruel smile onto his face, voice loud and brittle, "See? Humanity cannot break a united galaxy." And counselors nodded, clinging to those words like drowning beings clinging to broken debris, whispering to themselves, "Yes, yes, numbers win. We have firepower. We have control." But their eyes betrayed the truth. Fear was rotting them from the inside, because every report said the same thing. The object did not slow, did not deviate, did not acknowledge the blockade. It continued forward like the fleets weren't even there, and that reality, being ignored, cut deeper than any weapon, because a predator that does not see you as a threat is a predator that has already decided your fate. When the object finally approached visual range, the blockade fleets held position, shaking but ready, thousands of cannons aimed into the darkness, engines burning, shields raised, commanders screaming orders through trembling voices. "Prepare to fire on my mark!" And the silence that followed was suffocating, like the entire universe inhaled and refused to exhale. Then, a shadow appeared, small, black, emotionless, gliding into the crosshairs of thousands of weapons, and just seeing it made. Soldiers gasped because it did not look like a ship, did not look like technology. It looked like a coffin slicing through space, a silent tomb that carried death without even needing to open, and commanders all across the blockade felt panic clawing at their minds. But they forced themselves to continue, forced themselves to believe in their own strength, forced themselves to believe they were in control, and with shaking hands they gave the only order they could. Fire! And the galaxy's greatest fleets unleashed everything. Missiles, plasma beams, rail cannons, energy lances. Tens of thousands of shots that lit up space like a burning sun, turning the void into a storm of blinding destruction. And the council cheered, pride returning, arrogance growing. "See? Nothing survives that. Humans are foolish to challenge us." But then, slowly, horribly, the explosions faded, the light died, and the battlefield cleared, and the object remained untouched, unshaken, unmoved, every weapon disappearing the same way the first shot had vanished, swallowed into nothingness, erased like it had never existed. And a heavy chill fell over the fleets, because this wasn't shield resistance, this wasn't armor. This was something beyond understanding, something that refused to even acknowledge their attack, and the blockade officers stared in numb disbelief as scans confirmed the impossible. No damage detected, zero effect, zero interaction. The silence that followed was worse than any scream, because the fleets now understood the deepest horror. Their strongest strike had meant nothing. Not a dent, not a flicker, not a sound. And panic exploded through the formations, some captains shouting, "Retreat!" Others begging, "We need backup!" Others simply sobbing, "We can't stop it." But before any order could spread, before any ship could turn, the object pulsed, just once. A tiny flicker of faint white light across its hull, gentle, soft, almost harmless. And for a heartbeat the fleet stared, confused, hopeful, but then every ship's lights went out at the exact same moment. Like the stars themselves had been switched off. Engines dead, weapons dead, shields dead, life support dead, every system silent, every vessel drifting lifelessly in space. And across thousands of bridges, soldiers collapsed into terrified sobs, because they weren't being destroyed, they were being silenced, erased from the fight, removed from existence as participants, treated like insects swatted aside without effort. And in the council chamber the speaker trembled, voice shaking as he whispered, What did it do?" And the officer beside him stared at his dead console, tears falling. "It shut down an entire fleet, without firing." Then the screens flickered with a new message. Cold, simple, final, first price paid. And that message stabbed through every soul like a knife, because it meant this was not the end, not the victory, not the punishment. Only the beginning, the first consequence, the first debt collected for ignoring humanity's warning, and as the object resumed its silent advance, gliding past the powerless blockade as if it were nothing, everyone finally understood the truth they had refused to see. Humans didn't threaten. Humans promised. As the powerless blockade drifted like a graveyard in space, thousands of silent ships frozen in darkness, the object continued forward without slowing, without changing course, without even acknowledging the fleets it had just erased from the fight, and that cold indifference became the most terrifying truth of all, because it didn't destroy the armada out of rage, it disabled them because they were irrelevant, obstacles too small to matter, and when a weapon refuses to waste effort on you, it means only one thing: you were never the target. And as that realization spread like poison through the council chamber, every leader felt their pride crack, their arrogance rot, their confidence collapse, leaving nothing but shivering fear, because they finally understood the blockade wasn't a battle. It was a message, a demonstration, the first price in a debt the galaxy didn't know it owed, and now the object was coming for the second. In the war room, alarms flickered back to life, shaky and glitching, as if the systems themselves were terrified, and the speaker leaned forward, voice hoarse. "Scan it again. Find out what it is." And technicians scrambled, hands shaking, tears on their cheeks, forcing sensors online manually, bypassing fried circuits, fighting failing systems, desperate for answers, because without knowledge, they had no hope. And after several agonizing minutes, one screen finally lit up, a distorted scan of the object, blurry but readable, and every head turned toward it, hearts pounding, breath held, waiting for a classification, any classification, a ship type, a model, a signature. But the screen didn't label it as a vessel, didn't call it a warship, didn't identify it as anything the galaxy recognized. Instead, a single term appeared in harsh red letters: Sentinel Unit, Class Unknown. A ripple of shock shot through the chamber. Sentinel? Not a ship? Not a craft? A unit? The speaker's voice trembled. What does that mean? But before anyone could answer, another line loaded beneath it, one that drained all color from every face. Purpose. Consequence. Enforcement. Every leader froze. Consequence. Enforcement. The object wasn't a weapon of war. It was a weapon of punishment, a device built for one purpose: to make sure warnings were not ignored. Commander after commander whispered in horror. It wasn't coming to fight us. It was coming to collect. And that simple shift in understanding shattered whatever illusions remained. Because weapons destroy enemies. Judgment destroys the guilty. And deeper scans continued, unlocking data. Fragments of code written in ancient human language. Rough translations forming on the screen. Activation condition. External threat to Earth. Response level. Irreversible. Negotiation protocol. None. Negotiation. None. The galaxy had sent warnings. The galaxy had issued commands. The galaxy had dismissed Earth. And humanity had responded not with words, but with law. A cold, unbreakable law. One warning. One chance. One price. A trembling scientist gasped as another file decrypted, showing schematics not of a ship with crew compartments or living quarters, but of a sealed core. No windows, no bridge, no life support. An autonomous design built for eternity, and the room went silent as a final line translated. Human presence required. No. And that sentence hit harder than any pulse because it meant what everyone feared: the Sentinel was not being piloted. No human was guiding it. No human was listening. No human was choosing targets. The Sentinel didn't need humanity to act. It had been authorized centuries ago. It had been waiting, and now it had executed its purpose. Counselors stumbled back, whispering in disbelief. Humans didn't send it, humans released it. And that realization turned fear into pure horror, because if the Sentinel didn't rely on human commands, then humanity's silence was not weakness. It was design. Then the screens flickered again, pulling up a final translation, one that made every heart stop. Warning enforcement sequence. Stage 1 complete. Stage 1. Meaning there were more stages, more prices, more consequences. The speaker collapsed into his seat, voice barely a breath. There's a sequence. This is only the start. and the chamber erupted into panic, leaders shouting, "Shut it down! Destroy it! We must stop the next stage!" But technicians screamed back, "We can't target it! We can't track it! We can't touch it!" And then, as if the universe wanted to twist the knife deeper, a projection appeared on the war room's central display, live footage from a civilian observatory on a distant world, showing the Sentinel passing overhead like a black eclipse, its shadow blanketing the planet in darkness for a full minute, causing cities to flicker, power grids to fail, communication towers to collapse into silence, and when light returned, a single message pulsed across every device. One warning: no pardon. Civilians screamed. Armies panicked. Entire planets fell into chaos. And in the council chamber, the speaker whispered the truth with a broken voice. "We thought humans would never make us pay." But the Sentinel wasn't coming to punish Earth's enemies, it was coming to punish their arrogance. As the words, "one warning," and "oh pardon," burned across every screen on every planet, a crushing silence spread through the galaxy. Not the silence of calm, but the silence of billions holding their breath at the same time, terrified to even move, terrified to even think, because for the first time in history the galaxy understood that this was not a threat, not a bluff, not a negotiation. This was judgment, and the judge was already here. In the council chamber, leaders trembled like children lost in a storm, their voices broken, their hands shaking uncontrollably, because everything they believed, their power, their control, their superiority, had cracked like thin glass, and beneath it lay a truth they never wanted to face. Humans had warned them, and they had laughed. Now the laughter was gone. The Sentinel changed course, angling directly toward the Council's capital world, and every sensor lit up red, tracking its unstoppable approach. The speaker tried to speak, his voice cracking, "Open communications, try again, send a plea." But the comm officers shook their heads with empty eyes. "It won't listen. It has no channel to receive. It was never built to talk." And that realization stabbed deeper than any blade, because weapons that negotiate have limits. This one had none. Across the stars, ordinary people watched in horror. On distant worlds, parents held their children tightly. Soldiers stared at dead weapons with hollow eyes. Scientists collapsed over data pads, whispering, "We should have listened, we should have listened." And news broadcasts, once mocking and loud, had fallen into trembling silence. The once proud anchors now whispering like they were afraid of waking something monstrous. What do humans want? What will they do? But deep down, everyone already knew the answer. Humans didn't want anything. They weren't asking. They weren't begging. They weren't negotiating. They were enforcing. Inside the war room, technicians scrambled over malfunctioning consoles, desperate to find anything they could use, and suddenly one console flickered, its screen crackling with static before stabilizing, and the officer gasped, "Incoming transmission!" The room froze. Every leader turned toward the screen, hearts pounding so violently it hurt, expecting a message from the Sentinel, from its core, from its system. But instead, the screen didn't show the Sentinel. It showed Earth. A ruined Earth? A burning Earth? No, an Earth alive, powered, glowing with networks, satellites, and silent strength. Then the static cleared, and for the first time in 300 years, a human appeared on the galactic network. Not a soldier in armor, not a leader in uniform, but a calm, steady figure dressed in black, face emotionless, eyes sharp, voice cold. When he spoke, every being in the galaxy felt their blood turn to ice. "We warned you." For words, simple, soft, deadly, counselors collapsed back into their seats, some covering their mouths, some staring with wide, tear-filled eyes, because hearing a human voice, after centuries of believing humanity was weak, alone, desperate, felt like being dragged into an ancient nightmare. The human continued, voice steady, emotionless, each word heavy like a hammer. "We asked for peace. You refused." Council leaders shook their heads, some whimpering. "We didn't know, we didn't mean." But the human's voice cut through them like steel. "We set one rule. You broke it." A counselor sobbed, "We only meant to protect the galaxy." But the human didn't blink, didn't soften, didn't pity. "You meant to control us." The truth exploded through the chamber like a bomb. Leaders bowed their heads, ashamed, terrified, exposed. The human leaned forward, eyes cold, empty, ancient with pain. You believed there would be no price. Silence stabbed the room. No one dared breathe. No one dared look away. Then the final words came, quiet but merciless. The price has come. Before anyone could respond, screens across the galaxy shut off. Every broadcast, every transmission, every signal, replaced by a single line of text glowing in blood-red light. Enforcement Stage 2. Consequence deployment. And then, as if the universe itself wanted to tear open the last piece of hope, thousands of star systems detected energy signatures. Massive, synchronized, unstoppable. Rising from Earth's dark side, launching into space like spears of pure vengeance. The galaxy screamed. The council collapsed. The sentinel accelerated. And every living soul understood the truth. The warning was not the threat. The warning was the mercy. The moment Enforcement Stage 2, Consequence deployment, flashed across every screen in the galaxy. A wave of dread hit billions like a physical blow, knocking breath from lungs, stealing strength from legs, turning every heartbeat into a painful reminder that the price humanity spoke of was no longer a threat. It was happening, and no one could stop it. Across star systems, alarms screamed, worlds shook, military bases erupted into chaos. Officers shouting orders they knew were useless, soldiers running to weapons that could not fire, commanders staring helplessly at dead screens because every defense system had gone offline the instant Stage 2 activated. Like the galaxy itself was being stripped of power, stripped of control, stripped of the illusion that it could resist. And through that spiraling panic came the first confirmation. Dozens of sentinels, identical to the first, had launched from hidden platforms near Earth, rising like dark pillars into space, silent, cold, unstoppable, forming a wall around their homeworld before splitting into separate trajectories, each heading toward different corners of the galaxy, each marked with the same chilling designation, Consequence Unit. In the council chamber, fear finally broke into full horror. Leaders screamed over each other, voices cracking. There are more of them? How many? Where are they going? But no answer came because the screens weren't showing maps anymore. They were showing countdowns, one for each sentinel, ticking down toward unnamed targets, numbers falling fast like falling stars signaling the end of entire civilizations. The speaker, once proud, once mocking, now trembled so violently he could barely speak, his voice breaking like shattered glass. We must surrender. We must beg. We must show regret. But the calm officers shook their heads with hopeless eyes. They shut every channel. There is no way to speak, no way to ask, no way to plead. And those words felt like knives, because consequences are not conversations, they are verdicts. Far beyond the council, on distant planets, entire cities watched helplessly as sentinels appeared in the sky. Tiny black shapes growing larger, casting massive shadows across continents, blocking out suns, turning daylight into night. Civilians screamed, families clung together, leaders issued last-minute commands, but everything failed. Every weapon, every shield, every engine, every defense. Dead, silent, useless. The sentinels did not fire. They did not destroy buildings. They did not explode worlds. Instead, they emitted a pulse. A silent wave of invisible energy sweeping through cities like a cold wind, and when it passed, nothing looked broken, nothing looked burned, but every military base, every command center, every fleet dock, every war factory, every weapon storage facility went dark. Systems erased, technology wiped clean, making entire civilizations defenseless in a single breath. And the galaxy finally understood the meaning of punishment. Not death, not fire, not destruction, but helplessness. Vulnerability, powerlessness, a consequence worse than war. Being left unable to fight ever again. On one war world, a general dropped to his knees as every missile vanished from his screens. Every fighter craft shut down. Every orbital cannon went offline. His voice cracked into a sob. They aren't killing us. They're disarming us. And that realization spread like wildfire, freezing blood, breaking hope, because Stage 2 wasn't a slaughter. It was a declaration. You are no longer allowed to threaten us. Back in the council, screens lit up again. Not with maps, not with data, but with a new message burned in white over black. The price for ignoring peace is losing power. Leaders stared at it, numb, shattered, tears streaming down faces that once radiated arrogance. One counselor whispered, voice shaking uncontrollably. They warned us to stop building warships, and now they are taking war from us. Another collapsed into his hands, sobbing, we should have listened. We should have listened. But regret was useless now. The price was being paid. Then, in the darkest corner of the war room, a junior officer gasped as data flickered onto her console. Real-time footage from a distant star system. A sentinel hovered over a massive war fleet shipyard, home to millions of soldiers and countless weapons. The sentinel pulsed once, and the entire shipyard disappeared. Not exploded, not burned, not shattered. Just gone, erased, leaving empty space where the galaxy's greatest arsenal once existed. The officer screamed, they're erasing our ability to fight. And the council fell silent, because they now understood that humanity was not destroying life. It was destroying the idea of war itself. The Sentinels continued their silent work, planet by planet, system by system, wiping out fleets, erasing weapons, disabling armies, leaving civilizations unarmed, unable to threaten anyone, especially Earth, ever again. And then, as the destruction of military power reached its peak, every Sentinel paused at the same moment, freezing in space, lights dimmed to a low pulse, like predators waiting for the next command. Every screen in the galaxy flickered. A final line appeared, colder than anything before. Stage 2 complete. Final stage preparing. And as those words burned into every trembling mind, a single truth echoed through every heart. The consequences had begun. The punishment was real. When the words Stage 2 complete, final stage preparing, burned across every device in every corner of the galaxy, a silence heavier than death fell over billions, because Stage 1 had taken fleets, Stage 2 had taken weapons, and no one could imagine what a final stage meant. Yet everyone felt it in their bones. Whatever was coming next would be worse than destruction, worse than erasure, worse than helplessness. And in the council chamber, leaders stared at the message with hollow eyes, bodies shaking, minds breaking, because for the first time in history they were not rulers of anything, not even their own fate. Their power was gone. Their armies were gone. Their defenses were gone. The galaxy was naked, exposed, unarmed, silent. And then the Sentinels moved. Not slowly, not one by one, all at once. Hundreds, maybe thousands, shifted positions across the star maps, forming a perfect geometric ring, a massive circle around council space, around the core systems, around every major civilization, every capital, every world that once boasted power. A trap, a cage, a boundary. The galaxy gasped, terrified voices echoing across dark ships and powerless cities. They're surrounding us? We're being enclosed. We can't escape. In the war room, the speaker collapsed into his chair, whispering, final stage, what is it? But deep down, everyone already knew. It wasn't about war anymore. It was about judgment. And judgment was never gentle. Suddenly, one screen flickered back to life, crackling with static, and a shaky live feed appeared. A view from a small civilian shuttle drifting near the edge of the ring. The camera pointed into the void, where a sentinel hovered, silent and cold. Then its core began to glow, not gold, not white, but deep, blood red, pulsing slowly, like a heartbeat waking after centuries of sleep. And then another sentinel glowed red, and another, and another. One by one, the entire ring ignited in red light, forming a burning circle around the galaxy, the shape of a seal. A warning. A prison. The junior officer screamed, voice cracking, are they going to destroy us? But a scientist shook his head, eyes filled with dread. No, destruction is mercy. And everyone felt those words like ice in their veins, because destruction would be quick. But this felt deliberate, slow, final. The red lights intensified, brighter, 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 until the war room screens auto-translated a new reading, Territorial Finalization Protocol. No one understood. No one could. Until the next line appeared. Galaxy is no longer permitted to threaten Earth. A counselor whispered through trembling lips. There, sealing us in. And that realization shattered whatever hope remained. Because final stage wasn't about killing. It was about control. About caging an entire galaxy. About making sure no species could ever rise, ever arm, ever challenge, ever grow beyond the walls humanity had drawn. Every sentinel pulsed red again, and the star maps updated automatically, showing thousands of red lines stretching between sentinel positions, forming a massive energy barrier, a fence of pure consequence, cutting the galaxy off from the rest of the universe, locking every species inside like prisoners in a silent cosmic cell that no ships would leave. No fleets would rise. No war would ever begin again. The galaxy was no longer free. In the council chamber, sobs echoed. Hands covered faces. Leaders whispered prayers. Civilians across worlds fell to their knees. Entire civilizations understood the final truth. Humans hadn't come to destroy. Humans had come to end choice. To end war by ending freedom. Then, for the first time since the original broadcast, a single human voice returned, calm, emotionless, echoing across every system. Peace is no longer optional. The Sentinel's lights dimmed. The barrier solidified. The screens went black, and a final message appeared, soft but merciless. Final stage complete. Monitoring begins. The galaxy was no longer a civilization. It was a sentence. And humanity was the warden. The warning had been ignored. The price had been paid.